And I can say family because all of you are part of the CAPS family. And although I don't know many of you up here, because CAPS has been around for a long time, I know that you are part of a group of folks who have been relentless in their pursuit of ending HIV. Right from the very beginning. We've been engaged in work and we have some of the folks who really started it here, so I'm like in awe right now of the work that CAPS has done. And so I want to thank you all for coming here in celebration with us, in collaboration with us, to really mark this incredible milestone for CAPS and the work that has been done. And hopefully many of you were able to see Steve Ward's town hall earlier. He really laid out the history, the historical context in which CAPS came to be. And to think that I'm looking around at a group of folks who have been at the forefront back in the day when people weren't even thinking about this stuff, back in the day when there was so much stigma, folks who want to touch folks who are living with HIV. You all were the group of folks who are trying to figure out what can we do to help. And I'm quite frankly in awe of you. And I'm thankful and humbled to be part of this group of incredible folks who make it their life passion and journey to help others, and in particular, help the most vulnerable, help those who are living, struggling, at risk, and living with HIV. So you all are you don't just talk about it, you actually you be about it. And so I want to thank you all for being here as an extension of that work. I can't let this day go by without acknowledging the person who really made this thing happen. And so before I forget, I need to acknowledge Leslie Moose. So you can see behind me a group of incredible folks who are here to really talk about the historical context of CAPS, to talk about, these are really the heroes, right? These are the folks who've been there at the very beginning. And so to share this stage with them is really quite amazing for me. So I get to serve as MC and pass the mic to the folks who really have done all of the work for the last 30 years. And to start off with, I'm going to pass the mic to our newly appointed chair of the Division of Medicine, who in fact was right there at the very beginning as well. So we are in really great company. Dr. Bob Wachter.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for the extraordinary work you do. I came out to San Francisco in 1983 as an intern, and I remember hearing about the first case of AIDS in 1981 when I was a third-year medical student, and presenting this young gay man with shortness of breath and pneumonia, and my attending at the time saying, this thing is going to change the practice of medicine. The thing didn't have a name at the time. But over the next 10 years or so, it certainly dominated my training as we took care of an extraordinary number of patients who all tragically died. And becoming chair of this great department, which became official 2 weeks ago, is a homecoming of a sort for me, because now CAPS sort of lives in my orbit, which it had not for a while. And so it's a chance to come back and recapture some of the amazing things that you guys do every single day to improve the way we take care of patients with HIV and more importantly, prevent it. It gave me an opportunity. Steve mentioned my role in the 6th International AIDS Conference during his talk recently. So it gave me an opportunity to pull off my shelf today a book I had not looked at for about 15 years, a book I wrote called Fragile Coalition, Scientists, Activists, and AIDS. I wrote it after I was program director of the International conference that happened here in 1990. UCSF decided to sponsor the conference in an act of great courage, I think, at the time. UCSF did. A lot of other institutions ran the other way when AIDS became a thing, and UCSF did just the opposite. We said, this is important, we need to smack in the middle of this, and we did. John Ziegler and Paul Overday ran the conference and asked me to become the program director in an act of administrative malpractice. I was very young, and I look at my picture in this book, and it looks like my bar mitzvah picture. I'm going to very briefly read something from the flap, because it highlighted to me as I looked at this today what you all have done. I talked about, this is really talking about the conference, but I said the story is evocative, infuriating, amusing, moving, and vitally important. It is about power and egos as much as science and data. In it lies an understanding not only of the fragile coalition between scientists and activists in AIDS, but a bigger truth about the evolving relationship between patients, doctors, and government in all matters of health policy. The empowerment of patients and the questioning of scientific expertise, I wrote. It will be part of the sociological landscape of the 1990s. We didn't think beyond that. And not only in AIDS, having our patients or research subjects ask or demand to have an active voice in what we do and how we do it may be challenging, time-consuming, and even unpleasant. It is also undeniably right. You folks have been doing what is right for the last 30 years. You've made an extraordinary difference. And what is truly important to me is the difference goes well beyond HIV and AIDS. The way that we now think about science, the way we now think about connecting with the communities of patients that we take care of, is extraordinarily different than it was 30 years ago. And it's really all because of the work you've done. A tip of the hat to Margarita, to Tom, to Steve, to Speaker Pelosi for the extraordinary work that you've done in making this such an unbelievably robust enterprise. I'm very proud to have a part of my role. Thank you so much.
A couple of weeks ago, the faculty had a retreat, and one of the games that we played was, we had this game, and one of the questions we had to ask is, who is your favorite theorist? And all of us who have been researchers have this person who, like, we are in awe of, right? The rock star of research. And so if you were to ask me who one of my favorite prevention researchers are, it would be this next speaker. He is someone who has been there from the beginning, who has really been an incredible inspiration to me and a number of people. But more importantly, he is one of the folks who's really laid out the science that has allowed us to make the advances that we have around HIV. And so I'm really honored to introduce to you Dr. Tom Coates.
This is such an emotional moment. It is so wonderful just to see everybody and to realize that none of us have changed. And it's really wonderful. This really is an emotional moment. We really did build something together. I had the privilege of working here at UCSF for 21 years before I headed to the Southern Branch. UCLA, the going away gift when I left was 3 bottles of fresh air. Renewable. I'm pleased to report that I have survived despite Los Angeles air and have enjoyed working at UCLA in some very different capacities. But I continue my HIV research. I continue to work the work that we're doing in South Africa, Malawi, Mozambique, Botswana, and really, as Margarita said, working with the poorest of the poor. One of the things that I had to get used to, though, about going to UCLA is that daily I have to walk into a hospital named after Ronald Reagan. And then I have to look at his picture. And then I have to light a candle. No. So it's ironic. You know, one of the best things about working in HIV is the spirit and the passion that we brought to it. And I remember in 1982, when I first arrived here at UCSF, telling my boss at the time, I won't tell you his name, I said, I'm going to get involved in HIV. He said, bad decision, bad career decision, flash in the pan, It's going to come and it's going to go. And then I told one of my former professors at Stanford that I was going to get involved in HIV, and his response was actually worse. He said, "Oh, you're not going to get involved in that, are you?" And it was almost like, how could we not get involved? What a privilege, though. I feel like we're the privileged people. What a privilege to be able to spend one's career working on a disease that we really care about, and that many of us have. I never thought I'd be alive today. And thanks to the best thing that the U.S. government has ever done. It gets trashed a lot these days, but the best thing that the U.S. government ever did was its HIV response. And Speaker Pelosi was very instrumental in making all of that happen. And the work is not over. Margarita, before she sent in the Senate, sent it to me to take a look at it, and it was a marvelous piece of work. And yes, we have new biomedical tools, and yes, they're marvelous, and I'm so glad we have these tools, but you know what? There's still behavior. And you know what? It still counts, and it still matters a lot. So continue the good work. It's just been wonderful to see everybody today, and congratulations to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I can't imagine what it's like to have to walk into Reagan Hospital. But the scary thing is that it could get worse. And I'm not telling you who to vote for, but I trust that you know. Okay. Our next speaker is someone who is really a person who's right there with Tom at the beginning. And when you talk about behavioral interventions and the long-lasting impact of them, you automatically think of this person. And in terms of the next generation of folks who do this research, and I see many of you out here, our success in being able to train the next generation and the success of that next generation is really in large part due to our next speaker. She has been instrumental in not only building research in terms of intervention research and how do we help folks change their behavior to be more safe, to be healthy, to have just a better well-being in life. She's also touched many of the folks who are doing the work, that impactful work today. And so I'm honored to work with her every day. Dr. Susan Kiglis.
Thank you all. I knew I had to bring notes because I'm also feeling very emotional, and I just would lose every word I could think of if I didn't have some cheat sheets. So I've been here at CAPS since the start. I've been co-director for the last 14 years or so. I became co-director thinking I was going to learn from Tom about leadership issues, and then he announced he was going to UCLA. But he was a good role model even before I was co-director. I think Lance Pollock and I are the only ones left from that time now, from the very start, who still work here at CAPS. I still remember our very first site visit when we applied for the Center grant. And I'm remembering some of the people who I worked with from the start. Joe Catania, John Peterson, Ron Stahl, Colleen Hoff, Leon McCusick, and of course, Tom Coates. And I want to give a special thank you to Leslie Roos, who came a year after CAPS began, and who's done a marvelous job of pulling this celebration together. Thank you, Leslie. So here we are 30 years later. CAPS has been renowned for our excellent research. We've been at the forefront of AIDS prevention research, now more appropriately called HIV research. When I started, I remember it was called HTLV3, and I thought I'd never remember that term, and now I can never forget. Our research has made an enormous impact, both domestically and internationally. Not only has our research made an impact, but we've also trained or supported over 500 scientists to conduct HIV research, including our international TAPS researchers, our postdocs, our faculty who are here and who have been here and have moved on to other places, various staff who have gone on to become scientists here and beyond. These scientists have gone out and made an impact on HIV throughout We don't even know anymore how many papers people who have been connected to CAPS have published, clearly in the thousands. We have affected AIDS policies throughout the world. We have been unified because for most of us, this has been a way to address social justice issues. Gay rights, women's rights, transgender people's rights, Latino and African American rights, and more. HIV has never before and still does not randomly strike people. And still it is usually the most marginalized, stigmatized, and disenfranchised people who contract HIV. Our work to address the AIDS pandemic has been born of our desires to address human rights and inequalities. This has been a fundamental basis of much of our research. And we have also been affected by AIDS itself, losing some of our best to HIV and HIV-related issues. Leon McCusick, Bobby Hilliard, Reinaldo Ortiz, Mark Gould, Bob Hayes, and most recently our dear Alberto Curotto. The passing of these dear friends and many, many others keep us committed to the fight. And of course, we miss our friends who've passed from other diseases as well. There's another way in which CAPS has been and continues to be a very special place. From the start, CAPS has been filled with people who truly care about each other. Although we have come to compete, we have to compete with others in the outside world for our funding, and this has become fierce. Our culture has been to collaborate and cooperate with each other rather than to compete. We help and support each other. We generously give our time to help each other to do excellent, meaningful science, and we support each other to cope with the many hardships that life brings. Over the years, although many people have come and gone on to other work, usually they stay in touch with various folks here. The ties run deep. We laugh together, celebrate together, and have mourned together. We have been a community for each other, and indeed a family for each other. I'm extremely proud to have been connected to such an enormously impactful and caring center, full of compassionate people, activists, many of us, who are here now and have been part of our center throughout its 30 years of existence. People who've wanted to make a difference, and indeed we have made a difference in many people's lives across the globe. Thank you.
So when we talk about heroes in the struggle and people who have made a difference, you have to think about Congresswoman Barbara Lee. She has been such a voice, a strong voice in Congress around HIV/AIDS issues. And we are honored to have one of her aides come and speak on her behalf this evening. So Mr. Xavier.
On behalf of Congresswoman Barbara Lee, I want to give a sincere thank you to all of you here, and a thank you to Margaret Lightfoot and the administration of the Center for AIDS Prevention Studies, the UCSF family, who are conducting research every day that is saving lives and improving outcomes for people living with AIDS, and everyone here tonight as well, for supporting this essential program. The Congresswoman regrets that she's unable to be with you today, but I know she greatly appreciates the partnerships you've all helped to create here. As we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the UCSF Center for AIDS Prevention Studies, it is important to reflect on how far we have come from the early days of this epidemic. Taking HIV medication is easier to take than it used to be. Many people with HIV just take one pill once a day. That's it. Just one. There are now multiple options for medication, including 6 classes of antiretroviral drugs and more than 30 total drugs. If one doesn't work or causes side effects, the doctor and the patient now have many other options. There are well-developed supportive community groups today to help stop people from feeling alone or isolated. We can effectively test whether someone has HIV much faster than we could in the past. The tireless work that happens at the UCSF Center for AIDS Prevention Studies is a key component of these successes. And you should be very proud that the National Institute for Mental Health recently awarded an $8.5 million grant to continue the work on prevention. With this federal support, CAPS researchers are looking at interventions such as condom promotion and needle exchanges, reducing sexual and substance use risks, voluntary counseling and testing, and increasing adherence to medications, community building, prevention counseling for HIV-positive individuals, and with their help, I know we can get to zero on all fronts. Woo! One day. We're at a really pivotal moment for HIV and AIDS. Soon, there'll be a new administration and a different Congress. No doubt, there'll be challenges and opportunities in the future. But despite the ebb and flow of DC politics, Congresswoman Lee has been and will continue to be dedicated to supporting this effort and voicing your ideas in Washington, D.C. She clearly recognizes her role in combating the global epidemic. As many of you know, the Congresswoman is the co-chair and co-founder of the Congressional HIV and AIDS Caucus and has authored or co-authored every major piece of HIV and AIDS legislation, both domestic and global. Congresswoman Lee, the Congressional Black Caucus, and President George Bush crafted the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or as you know, PEPFAR. A lot of excitement. Which, as you know, today is providing ARVs for nearly 8 million people worldwide. Congresswoman Lee has also introduced legislation to combat discrimination in state laws against those who test positive for HIV, and she supported incentives for states to reform existing policies targeting people living with HIV, felony charges, and severe punishments for behavior that has no measurable risk of transmitting HIV. As a member of the 2 committees that fund the fight against domestic and global HIV and AIDS, she continues to vote in favor of policies that promote the expansion of research and treatment options to continue to make these important steps. The Congresswoman is a big supporter of page turns. I don't know if you knew that. Really, from the bottom of her heart, also wants to thank House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi for all of the work she's done. The leader's role really does set the stage for what policy changes can happen, and without her leadership, I don't know what would be possible in this country. So, again, thank you. As far as we come, there's still much more work to be done, and we're still working to combat the global epidemic. But with partners like CAPS, blazing the trail for potential change is endless, and the trail continues to go on and on with endless possibilities. And so, congratulations as you celebrate 30 years of innovation and leadership in this effort.
So for those of you who came to the town hall earlier today, you got a good sense of the impact of our next speaker. I think that if you could point to one person who's made like one of the biggest impacts in terms of the social justice issues around LGBT, in terms of the response to HIV, it would be Steve Moore. Now, I gave a big long introduction earlier, so I'm not going to repeat that. But it is that, Steve, you are the hero in the fight. Thank you for what you have done. Dr. Steve Moore.
So many of you have heard me speak earlier today, but I started a little later. At the beginning, I was born in this college town, Amherst, and my father was a politician. So I had a combination of academics and politics in my blood. At age 15, I met JFK on the evening before the election, and rode in the motorcade with him. And at that time, this little ping went off in my ear. And later, I read Gertrude Stein's autobiography of Alice B. Toklas, in which Gertrude Stein explains that whenever she meets a genius, there's a little ping in her head. And as I moved on in combining politics and academics, I had the opportunity to end up in Sacramento for a while. And I sat in a meeting with Willie Brown, and off it went again, that little ping. And I said, well, I'm in the presence of a political genius. And then I met Nancy Pelosi. And the pain really went off. And it kept on going off. And we were so lucky that at the time this center was being developed, Nancy Pelosi in 1987, in the worst time this city has ever imagined in terms of death and dying, and it was just horrible. We needed the leadership, and at the time the need had emerged. And I had the privilege of my life, loving both academics and politics, to spend 11 years in Washington working with who I think is the biggest genius who's ever gone to Congress. Please welcome leader Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you very much, Steve. So much has been said about CAPS, how it was to be in the leadership of it when it began. As we have heard, Dr. Lightfoot, Margarita, thank you for starting us off by saying, this is family. Where is she from? This is family. Because this is family. It's a family of people who care about each other and view all of America's children, all of America's people as part of the family and understand our responsibilities to each other. So thank you, Dr. Margaret Lightfoot, for what you have done at CAPS. Steve said to me, thank God for Dr. Lightfoot. Now I can focus on research and policy and the rest while she does what she does here. Dr. Wachter and his book, when he talks about the Fragile Coalition, scientist, activist, and AIDS. Scientist, the first part of it, scientist, and what it meant, that coalition, that fragile coalition, what it meant sociologically as well as scientifically. To you, Dr. Wachter, I say thank you for coming full circle, and to CAPS. And I really believe, and you were speaking, something I say all the time, and I think now that I can say it with even more authority, hearing you, that the efforts that were made, mobilization against AIDS, in all of its forms, was very instrumental in the change in our society. I don't think we would, people said, oh, it moved so quickly to marriage equality. No, I think that path was really deeply, that way was deeply prepared by the mobilization against AIDS. And so in terms of families, knowing who in their family might be affected by AIDS, and then finding out maybe on the same day that their child was LGBT, and in many cases embracing that, some not. Also, the mobilization against breast cancer really was modeled after the mobilization against AIDS. So whether it's about science and health, or whether it's about science and sociology, what was started here really was a blessing and made a big difference, as Dr. Kagalis was talking about, making a difference to America. What you all did, and Dr. Coates, oh my gosh, aren't we lucky? To the life of John Coates. I used to watch him and Paul Volberding, and just to see them in action. I know they're young now, but 30 years ago we're talking. Just the power of it all, of the intellect, of the science, of the research, of the freedom of research. Just a remarkable gift to the world. We took a terrible big bite of the wormy apple called HIV/AIDS, and San Francisco rose to the occasion of taking the responsibility of sharing our experience with other people. I thank Xavier Martin, Representative of Congresswoman Barbara Lee, for going over some of the actions that were taken. But just think of it, and I'm going to think of it in terms of Dr. Steve Morin, because he was remarkable. 6 months, I'm talking about him, I'm talking about you, I'm talking about Tom Coates, I'm talking about Paul Volberding, I'm talking about Susan Kagalis, I'm talking about now Margarita Lightfoot, I'm talking about Dr. Bob Walker, I'm talking about all of you. But when you think of it, about 6 months after the establishment of CAPS, I was elected to Congress, and Steve agreed to come back to Washington to lead this fight against AIDS. He probably said today, I don't know if he did, but when I went to the floor of the House, and I say this to you, Susan, because of your remarks, I went to the floor of the House and they said to me, when you get sworn in a special election, you're not allowed to say anything. So just raise your hand and say yes when they say, do you accept whatever? Yes. Said Dan Bernal, my chief of staff here, is shaking his head, District Representative Steve Bernal. Said just say yes. So when I did, the speaker said, well, the gentle lady from California, the gentle lady from California would like to address the House. So I'm looking at my friends who said, don't say a word, and they said, be short, be very short, be very short. So I went up to thank my parents, my constituents for sending me there, and said that I was coming to Washington to fight against HIV and AIDS, or tell them that Sala sent me. She was the former member. So I looked at the folks and I thought, that was the shortest speech you could ever make. And they're all like, oh my God. I said, well, you couldn't think that was long. Why would you ever want the first thing these people know about you would be that you're here to fight HIV and AIDS? I said, well, because that's why I came here. Self-serving as that story is, I just tell it to put an exclamation point about what you said, Susan, about the discrimination, and others have addressed as well, the discrimination that was in. So we had a scientific challenge, we had a life-death challenge, personal challenges in terms of that, but we also had to deal with the discrimination, and as was said by Dr. Coates, when he said, people said, why? Why are you doing that? I mean, this was pervasive at the time. But anyway, with the help of all of you and the model that San Francisco is and has been and was then, we were able to pass remarkable legislation. And Steve Marn was the catalyst. He was the person, understood the scientist being a doctor himself, understood the science, understood the importance of mental health in this issue in terms of its relationship to having effective prevention. So when we were writing things like all of the bills that we were writing, in the appropriations bills in the Ryan White CARE Act, it was about prevention, it was about research, and it was about care, but it was all about community-based prevention, care, and research. And that was the gift of one of the gifts of San Francisco to the world. Steve, because it's I'm so glad to have this opportunity to brag about him. Because of Steve, we were able to change the law in relationship to when an HIV/AIDS person was able to be on Medicaid. This was a very big deal because before you had to have full-blown AIDS to go on Medicaid. Well, how dumb was that? You know, if we're going to make life better, quality of life, prevent and lower the cost, if you're just thinking in that way, you would go on Medicaid with HIV. If you take that for granted, law of the land for over 25 years, Steve Marn made that happen.
Wow.
Again, understanding what San Francisco was teaching us. And then we had housing opportunity with people with HIV because we knew, well, how can you have special housing for people? What about housing for people with cancer, housing for people with this or that? I'm just talking about this right now. If you have HIV/AIDS, though, you do not need the stress of homelessness. And we have a model for continuum of care in San Francisco. And Steve Marn was instrumental in passing the housing opportunity for people with AIDS. I know he mentioned, I say this to brag about Steve, but I say this to brag about all of you. and the legacy that you are carrying. Some of you shaped it and are continuing it. Some of you have embraced it, and we all benefit from that. But when we talk about the PEPFAR, President Bush, as opposed to President Reagan, who really, well, I won't go into that. Tom already did. When President Bush wanted to do PEPFAR, I said to Bono and I said to everybody else, no, Bono was very instrumental in making that happen, Bono. No photo op unless this is a big PEPFAR. Why little PEPFAR so that the president can say, I did a PEPFAR. It has to be big or no photo op. And it was big. And they listened. I have to say, President Bush listened, and he takes great pride in that. But that was a major achievement of all of our members, and Congresswoman Barbara Lee certainly played a major role in that. She came to Congress revved up, effective from the start. I don't think she was 2 days, there 2 days that we sent her to the AIDS conference in Durban, South Africa, which was an experience in itself. But thinking of AIDS conferences, just think of this. We had that conference in 1990. It was, you can't even imagine the anger, justifiable anger that was there, the anxiety about the future, and the present form of demonstrating that. It was something. Well, without going too much into that, I think Steve did it at the earlier meeting. Remember this, at that time, we were hosting that here. UCSF, thank God, was hosting that here. People came from all over the world. That is, people came from all over the world who were not HIV infected or had AIDS. What a shame. Here we have a scientific meeting and we're deciding who can get in. It was a terrible thing, and justifiably, scientists said, I'm not going unless my friend comes. But nonetheless, it was a big and important meeting, and we're so proud of President Obama for lifting that prohibition. So we've gone through 30 years where sometimes we were just trying to get drugs one way or another from one country or another because they were not available here. How many times were we getting stuff from Madrid for relief blind, fighting with the Swede. It was a family. It was somebody in our family needs this drug. You're not letting it come in. We've got to figure out a way. And anyway, we won't go over that too much in public. But at the same time, our friends, now just think in this 30 years, our friends went from us trying to improve the quality of their lives until they left us. So many friends, more than one funeral a day, so many friends. To all of a sudden, improving the quality of their lives, to sustain life until we had the intervention that we were all praying, working, researching for. Still not there yet, but on the path. And then, the same people who are coming in asking us in our monthly meeting with people with HIV and AIDS to help them make out a will, were coming in to say, can you help me get a job? And now they're inviting us to their weddings. I'll tell you this, if you had told us 29 and a half years ago, when we first went to Congress, and 30 years ago when Kathy went, just from my own experience. If you had told me when I went to the floor that day and said that 29 and a half years would go by and we would still not have a cure, I would have never believed you. Never believed you. Now, we've made giant progress. We've taken the whole issue to a better place, but we still have to have the vaccine and we still have to have the cure. This virus is a very resourceful virus. Just when you think you have it, it mutates into something else. It's a killer. It has been a vicious killer. We've tried to change it into something that we can accommodate until there is a cure. But we're never going to stop on this. And just anecdotally, when we were starting, even before I was even thinking of going to Congress, but we were trying to get the Democratic Convention. Is it hard to use a term like Democratic in here? Democratic Convention. This is my segue to the political. The Democratic Convention, they were saying we could never go to San Francisco. They had, this was 82, 83, for the 84 convention, which they would make a decision 82, 83 on. We can't go there because you can just imagine. So we all made an agreement among ourselves that when any of the people coming from the, the arrangements committee, the selection committee, to see if we were up to doing this convention, when any of it would come, we would make a deal. For example, we'd say, this is Dr. Tom Coates. He deals with people with HIV every day, and he's our hero. Okay, and this is so-and-so, and he has HIV, and we love him so much. I can't believe that we're hugging and kissing each other. And let's have some refreshments. Let's all identify who has HIV/AIDS. Let's all dip our chip into the. I mean, this is pathetic, but it was. We just wanted to show them in every way not to be fearful, but to be concerned, and to recognize that we all were in it together, and we all had responsibilities. But also, San Francisco knew community-based care, prevention, research, but also that if we were going to do all that we could, it had to be a global initiative. So we would have those parades for the international mobilization against HIV and AIDS all the time. So take credit for what you have been a part of. Such a remarkable thing. We were laughing earlier about some, so to say, prevention techniques that they told me I could talk about them in San Francisco, but might not be able to talk about them in Iowa. And I said, well, that's really sad for you because this is an answer. I don't know what that is either. Just to say that we all had a very special privilege to be part of something that challenged the conscience of our country, challenged the opportunities for science in our country, challenged us in ways that we had not really experienced before, and had huge success, but recognized that much more needs to be done. So thank all of you for what you have done. Thank you, Dr. Steve Marn, for being a real hero in all of this. Thank you, Dr. Coates, Dr. Walker, Dr. Tagalas, Dr. Lightfoot, Barbara Lee, each and every one of you. So Tuesday's going to be an interesting day. Some of you don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. Everyone turns out and votes. Everyone who shares our values and respects the dignity and worth of every person. And not to say who I think is going to be president, but whoever she is, I know she
She's come here 4 days before an election, before the presidential election. That's very special. That just shows the commitment to HIV/AIDS in the Pelosi House. Thank you. I think it's important that all of you are here 4 days, also 4 days before election, because the fact is, elections are important, and we always have to have our spirits renewed as to what our call to service is, what our purpose is, and your purpose is clear and directly related to the elections.
So, we stand here in the shadow of giants, right, in the cause of HIV.
But as they have all alluded to, there's a lot of work left to be done. So we have to remain diligent, we have to remain relentless in the face of the narrowing NIH dollar, in the face of everything being assaulted in terms of Ryan White, in terms of HRSA funding, but we will remain that way. We will remain relentless, we will remain committed, and we're going to continue the hard work that we have been doing to end the HIV epidemic. So thank you to these giants, and thank you to all of you for continuing to partner with us and continuing this work as we move forward. Please enjoy some drinks, some food. Thanks very much.
This is Jeff Sheehy from the UCSF AIDS Research Institute. Thank you for watching CAP's 30th anniversary.